While I was away on business, my husband and his girlfriend tried to sell the home we built together behind my back. They thought I wouldn't notice. But I had already taken control long before. With one document, I stopped the sale, exposed the fraud, and reclaimed everything. This isn't revenge through anger, it's justice through silence. Kelsey adjusted the slim gold bracelet on her wrist as she stepped into the hallway outside the conference room. The hotel smelled of overbrewed coffee and expensive cologne, a familiar mix during corporate retreats. She had just wrapped up a panel discussion on brand authenticity and was still buzzing from the adrenaline. Her colleagues had clapped. Her boss had nodded with rare approval. For once she had felt seen. Then her phone lit up Aaron. She hesitated. It was strange. Aaron never called during work events. Texted, maybe. A sarcastic. Having fun with the marketing nerds or a reminder to pick up almond milk on her way home. But a call. She stepped away from the bustle of voices and tapped accept. Hey, she said, her voice light, expecting a casual check-in. What's up? But Aaron didn't ask how the conference was going. Didn't ask if her flight had been smooth. Didn't ask anything. Instead, his tone was flat. Clinical. I'm divorcing you. There was no pause, no build-up, no explanation. I've already sold the apartment. You'll need to figure out where you're going to live. The words slammed into her chest like a speeding car. She blinked at the hallway's patterned carpet, its dizzying swirls suddenly swimming. What? Her voice barely made it out. It's done, Aaron continued. The place is already in escrow. We needed the money for a bigger house. Nicole wants something with a yard. Kelsey went still. Nicole. She knew that name. She had seen it once accidentally on a Venmo transaction. Wine night, she had asked, and Aaron had brushed it off. Coworker. We all split a tab. But the way he had said her name, the casual ownership had sat in Kelsey's gut like a rock. Now the rock had cracked wide open. Nicole, Kelsey repeated slowly. So that's who this is for. Look, Aaron sighed as if she were being unreasonable. We've been drifting for a while. You're always traveling, always working. Nicole's grounded. She's ready for real life. Real life. Kelsey swallowed the scream that wanted to claw its way up her throat. She kept her tone even. You sold our apartment behind my back. We both knew it wasn't working. And I handled the hard part for you. It's already done. It took everything in her not to laugh. Or cry. Or hurl the phone across the hallway. Instead, she said, got it. Thanks for the update. And she hung up. Back in her room, the silence was deafening. She sat on the edge of the bed, the hotel's plush carpet soft under her heels. Her fingers shook as she took off her blazer, but her mind, it was razor sharp. Aaron thought she'd break. That she'd crumble under the weight of shock. That she'd flail like someone lost without him. But what he didn't know, what he never cared enough to notice, was that Kelsey had been preparing for the fall long before it happened. She opened her laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Legal Chloe. Her best friend since undergrad, Chloe, had gone on to become one of the sharpest real estate attorneys in the state. And 6 months ago, during a refinance, Aaron barely paid attention to Chloe, had insisted transfer the deed to your name only. It's just smart. Aaron had signed it without reading. Whatever makes the paperwork go away faster, he'd joked. Kelsey clicked on the PDF. Her full name was there in bold, Kelsey Morgan, sole owner. She let out a long, quiet breath. Aaron hadn't sold her apartment. He had tried to sell a fantasy, and he was about to wake up. She called Chloe. Tell me I'm hallucinating, Kelsey said, without preamble. Chloe's voice sharpened. What happened? Aaron called. Said he's divorcing me. Said he sold the apartment. To buy a house with Nicole. There was a beat of stunned silence, then a low whistle. Oh, honey. Does he not remember whose name is on the title? He doesn't. Kelsey said, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. Then this is going to be fun. That night, Kelsey didn't cry. Didn't scream. She poured herself a glass of water, sat at the tiny hotel desk, and made a list. To do: contact buyer via Chloe. Issue cease and desist. Secure financial records. Review asset protections. Pack emotional responses in a box and lock it. She was not going to beg. She was not going to explain. This wasn't a breakup, it was a revelation. In the morning, Kelsey stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her mascara from the night before had flaked, her hair was slightly tousled, but her eyes, they looked clear. Not because she wasn't in pain, but because the fog had lifted. The fog of second-guessing, of silencing herself to make him comfortable, of playing small so he could feel big. Aaron thought he had blindsided her. But he had only revealed himself. By 9 a.m., she was back at the conference on stage delivering a talk titled, "Power Isn't Always Loud." No one in the room knew that less than 24 hours ago her marriage had shattered. No one knew she had been declared disposable. And no one knew she was already planning how to win everything back, not with noise, but with strategy. Because Kelsey had learned the quietest kind of power wasn't the one that shouted in rage. It was the one that gathered its strength in silence. The kind that smiled at betrayal and sharpened its blade behind closed doors. And Aaron. He had no idea who he'd just tried to erase. The morning after the call, Kelsey woke to an unfamiliar stillness. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks open the sky. Her phone buzzed with meeting reminders and Slack pings from coworkers congratulating her on yesterday's talk. She responded with polite emojis, even dropped a thanks excited for today's panel FIO. But none of it touched her. It was like speaking through glass. The real conversation was still to come. She stared at her reflection again as she got dressed, brushing invisible lint from her blazer sleeve. There was no redness in her eyes. No puffiness. No trace of devastation. And that in itself was unsettling. She wasn't fine. But she wasn't falling apart either, she was calculating. And Aaron would never see it coming. By 8:15 a.m., she was back on the phone with Chloe. "I pulled the sale record," Chloe said, her voice clipped and focused. "Looks like the buyer's name is a Jonathan Kim. Closing was scheduled for the 17th. That's 4 days from now," Kelsey said, pacing the carpet of her hotel room. "Which gives us enough time to stop it. And Kels, this is important." He filed it with no co-signature. Of course he did. He thinks he still owns half of it. Chloe let out a dry laugh. This man signed away his rights 6 months ago. I still have the scanned documents from the refinance. Page 7, Clause 3B, full deed transferred to you. No joint claim. He didn't even ask what it meant. Kelsey stopped pacing. 6 months ago, he had signed his rights away without reading. Because he couldn't be bothered. Because he assumed he was always 10 steps ahead of her. Because men like Aaron were trained by the world to believe that charm was more powerful than caution and that women, especially wives, didn't read the fine print. But Kelsey had read every word, and she'd kept the receipts. Later that afternoon, after her final conference panel, Kelsey found a quiet booth in the hotel lounge and opened her laptop again. She drafted a message to her building's HOA notifying them that any property sale attempts required her signature alone. She CC'd Chloe. By 4:30 p.m., Chloe had already sent a formal notice to Jonathan Kim's legal representative stating the sale was fraudulent and unenforceable due to improper representation of ownership. At 5:12 p.m., Mr. Kim's team responded. They were, in their words, deeply concerned and willing to cooperate. At 5:35 p.m., Chloe forwarded the entire chain to Kelsey with a note, "He's done. We've got him cornered." "You okay?" Kelsey stared at that question. She hadn't really asked herself that. Was she okay? She didn't feel powerful. Not yet. But she felt awake. And that was new. Back home 2 days later, the weight of Aaron's betrayal began to take shape, not as a wound, but as a reckoning. The apartment felt off, not because anything had changed, but because everything had. His jackets were still on the hallway hook. His cologne still lingered in the bathroom. His precious gaming console blinked from the living room shelf, oblivious to the war he had started. But it was all illusion now. All of it belonged to her. And soon none of it would belong to him. She set her suitcase down and walked to the kitchen where she'd once spent hours cooking dinner he barely acknowledged. She poured herself a glass of wine, not because she needed to numb the pain, but because she wanted to toast to herself. To her silence, to her precision, to her fury, quiet but razor-sharp. The next morning, Aaron called. She let it ring. He texted, "Aaron, can we talk?" "Aaron, I think you're overreacting." "Aaron, the buyer's threatening to sue me." "What did you do?" She stared at the screen for a moment, then locked her phone without replying. She wasn't going to explain the laws of real estate to a man who had once asked if mortgage points were a thing you get for being married. That evening, Chloe came over with Chinese takeout and a stack of folders. "You look unnervingly calm," she said, handing Kelsey a container of sesame noodles. "I am calm," Kelsey replied. "He's unraveling. I'm rebuilding." They reviewed the divorce papers together, highlighting assets, checking dates, preparing timelines. Chloe had a knack for strategy, like a chess player who smiled politely while cornering a king. At one point, Chloe flipped to the page showing the title deed. "You know," she said, tapping the top line, "he signed this because you told him it meant a lower interest rate. He didn't even question it." Kelsey smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He never did," she said quietly. "He always assumed I didn't understand the details." The day Aaron stormed into the apartment was a Tuesday. Kelsey had just finished organizing receipts for Chloe when she heard the door slam. "You went behind my back," he bellowed, waving a letter. Chloe's cease and desist. "You can't do this, Kelsey. That apartment is half mine." She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into the folder on the counter, pulled out a crisp printout of the deed, and handed it to him. "You signed this 6 months ago. Page 7. He scanned it, his face morphing from anger to confusion to horror. "You tricked me." "No," Kelsey said calmly. "I protected myself." He paced the living room like a trapped animal. "This is insane. I already spent the deposit. Nicole and I." "Then maybe Nicole can help you pay it back," Kelsey interrupted. "You tried to sell something you didn't own. That's fraud, Aaron. You're seriously threatening me with legal action." "No," she said, her voice level. "I already took legal action." He left that night. Didn't pack, didn't slam the door this time. Just stood in the hallway looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. "You've changed," he said. "No," she replied. "I just stopped making myself small so you could feel big." Alone again, Kelsey stood in the center of the apartment. She didn't cry, she didn't smile either. What she felt wasn't triumph. It was clarity. And from that, she would build her new life quietly, fiercely, and entirely on her terms. She hadn't planned to look at the old photos. It started with her searching for a tax form in the bottom drawer of the hallway cabinet. Instead, her fingers brushed against a thin leather-bound album, one of the couple keepsakes Aaron insisted they create after year 2 of marriage. A curated display of dinner parties, beach vacations, blurry selfies after too many cocktails. Frozen smiles, arms around waists, kisses on cheeks that looking back now felt performative. She sat cross-legged on the living room rug and opened it anyway. There they were, Kelsey and Aaron in the early years. Young, hopeful, glossy with the illusion of partnership. But the longer she stared, the more her expression in each photo shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else might notice. But she noticed. A gradual fading behind the eyes, a mouth smiling more out of duty than joy. A posture that leaned toward Aaron but never quite touched him. It hit her like a slow, cold wave. She had been disappearing for years. Later that night, in the quiet of her hotel bathroom, Kelsey stood before the mirror. It was the first time in days she wasn't performing for anyone, not colleagues, not Chloe, not even herself. Just her reflection. And it wasn't anger she saw there. Not grief either. It was absence. Not the kind left by someone else's departure. The kind you leave behind yourself little by little, compromise by compromise. "I've been invisible," she whispered, voice catching in her throat. "Even in my own home." The truth sat heavy in the silence. She used to decorate the apartment with scented candles and personal photographs. She used to play jazz on Sunday mornings while she cooked eggs barefoot. But somewhere along the way, those things had stopped. The candles gave Aaron a headache. The jazz was too slow. The photos weren't aesthetic enough. And she had adjusted. Adjusted until there was almost nothing left to call hers. It hadn't always been like that. She met Aaron at a tech networking mixer in San Diego. He had smiled at her with the kind of charm that felt earned. Confident but not cocky. Attentive in a way that made her feel radiant. Their early months were full of long walks, wine-soaked conversations about dreams and drive. He said things like, "You're not like other women," and she mistook it for admiration instead of the red flag it was. Looking back, she remembered how he always offered to take care of the big stuff, the leases, the car loans, the taxes. "So you don't have to worry," he said, and she had been flattered. She'd called it partnership. Now she called it erosion. In their second year together, she had been offered a major promotion, one that required more travel, more visibility. She had walked into their kitchen that evening glowing with the news. Aaron had looked up from his laptop and said, "You really think you can juggle that and still have time for us?" She hadn't taken the job. Us, it turned out, really meant him. And that pattern had continued, her ambition always measured against his comfort. Kelsey poured herself a glass of water and sat on the edge of the hotel bed. The sheets were stiff and clinical, but at least they were hers for the night. Her thoughts wandered back to the countless times Aaron had dismissed her instincts. When she questioned a discrepancy in their joint account, "Relax, I've got it handled." When she suggested hiring a financial advisor, "Are you saying I can't manage our money?" When she asked why Nicole's name kept popping up in his texts, "You're being paranoid. Don't be that wife." Each time she had chosen peace over truth. Now she wondered, was it really peace, or just the slow death of her own voice? In her inbox that night was a message from a woman she didn't know, someone from a breakout session she'd spoken at during the conference. "Your panel meant so much to me. The way you spoke about reclaiming your narrative. I needed to hear that. Thank you." Kelsey stared at the screen for a long time. Reclaiming your narrative. It sounded noble, even empowering. But she didn't feel heroic. She felt like someone crawling out of a hole she had helped dig. And yet, somewhere between the pain and the paperwork, she had made a choice. She was done being palatable. Done being manageable. Done with folding herself into boxes that fit someone else's idea of love. The next morning, she took her coffee to the rooftop deck of the hotel. The sun had barely risen, and the city skyline shimmered in a lavender hue. She wrapped her cardigan tight and let the wind run through her hair. Below, cars were beginning to hum. A woman in a power suit hailed a cab. A man in running shorts jogged past with his golden retriever. Life unfolding, unaware of the quiet battle raging in the sky above. Kelsey watched it all and thought, I'd fall apart. But I'm still standing. Not triumphant yet. But awake. And dangerous in her quiet. That evening she called her mother. They hadn't spoken much over the last year, too many veiled comments about children, about timelines, about keeping your man happy. But tonight Kelsey just needed a voice from home. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Hi, honey." And for the first time in weeks Kelsey's voice cracked. "Mom, he tried to sell the apartment. Without telling me." A pause. "Did he succeed?" "No," Kelsey whispered. "Because it's in my name." "He didn't even know." There was a long silence on the line. Then gently her mother said, "I don't know whether to be proud or heartbroken." Kelsey closed her eyes. Maybe both. That night before bed she wrote in her journal something she hadn't done in years. "He tried to erase me. But he forgot I know how to write my own story. I'm not healing for him to see it. I'm healing so I can see myself again." And as she put the pen down, a single thought settled in her chest like armor. "This time I won't disappear." 2 days after she got home, the phone call came, not from Aaron but from Chloe, and her tone said everything. "They're pissed," Chloe said, skipping the pleasantries. Like truly livid. Jonathan Kim's team had no idea Aaron wasn't legally entitled to sell. Kelsey was sitting on the floor of her apartment surrounded by boxes, some packed with Aaron's belongings, others with the pieces of herself she'd recently rediscovered, old journals. A pair of canvas sneakers. She thought she'd lost her college diploma still in the mailing tube. "Do they think I was in on it?" she asked quietly. "No," Chloe replied. "Not after I forwarded them the deed and the recorded title. You're clean. Aaron's the one with a target on his back." Kelsey exhaled relief, curling at the edges of her exhaustion. But Chloe wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," she added. "He took their deposit." Silence. What Kelsey said, even though she'd heard it clearly. $10,000. Wired directly into his account. He told them the sale was a sure thing and insisted on fast-tracking closing. Kelsey's stomach turned. So he didn't just try to sell what he didn't own, he profited from it. Temporarily, Chloe said with a smirk in her voice. Because now they're threatening fraud litigation. And if he doesn't return the funds plus legal fees, they'll sue. Kelsey closed her eyes. The weight of Aaron's arrogance had always felt oppressive, like a ceiling slowly lowering itself year after year. But now that weight was shifting. Not onto her but back onto him. And the irony, he did it to himself. Later that afternoon, Jonathan Kim's assistant emailed Kelsey directly. Miss Morgan, thank you for your clarity and cooperation. It's clear you've acted with integrity. We're pursuing return of funds from Mr. Daniels and will keep your counsel updated. If you're ever in the market to sell in the future, we'd be happy to talk under more appropriate circumstances. Kelsey read the email twice, then leaned back in her chair, letting out a single dry laugh. The way men like Aaron worked was simple: take, twist, deny. And when it fell apart, blame the nearest woman. But this time there was no one else to blame. That night, Aaron texted again. Aaron, we need to talk. Aaron, I'm being threatened with a lawsuit. You could have warned me. Aaron Kells, this is serious. She stared at the screen, then typed, Kelsey, you committed fraud. Kelsey. That's serious. Kelsey, I'm not your safety net anymore. She didn't wait for his reply. She already knew what it would be: an excuse, a deflection, a plea disguised as accountability. Instead, she called Chloe. Let's start the formal divorce filing, she said. I'm done giving him the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, Chloe filed the motion and attached an affidavit outlining the invalid sale attempt. Within hours, Aaron was officially on legal notice, not just for divorce, but for potential fraud damages. And the best part, he had no leverage. The apartment wasn't his, there was no shared mortgage. No children, no business. He had built his plan on assumptions, and now he was watching the entire structure collapse. Later that week, Kelsey got a call from their mutual friend Nate. He was one of the few people who had stayed neutral during the marriage, cordial but distant. I heard what happened, he said cautiously. Aaron's telling people you blindsided him. Kelsey chuckled. Did he mention the part where he tried to sell my home behind my back? No, Nate admitted. Just that he's been burned by the legal system. Said he didn't know the deed had changed. He didn't know because he didn't read what he signed, she said, keeping her tone even. That's not betrayal, that's negligence. There was a pause. Then, unexpectedly, Nate said, honestly, I'm kind of impressed. She was too. Not because she enjoyed watching Aaron suffer, though a small part of her found justice oddly satisfying, but because for the first time in years she wasn't bracing for someone else's bad decisions to hurt her. She was no longer reactive. She was proactive. Intentional, strategic. And she had the documents to prove it. One afternoon, while clearing out the second bedroom, Kelsey found a crumpled notepad shoved behind a drawer. Aaron used to jot down financial projections, side hustle ideas, startup schemes that never launched. On the top page, written in his rushed handwriting, flip apartment, use equity for down payment. Kay won't know. She stared at the page for a long time. So it had been premeditated. Not a moment of heat. Not a dispirited choice, a plan. He had always seen her as a variable to manage, not a person to respect. She folded the page and slipped it into a folder with the divorce documents. Some truths were better kept in ink. That night, she updated her calendar. The 2nd of June. Official fraud notice sent. The 5th of June, buyer confirms cooperation. The 7th of June, divorce proceedings begin. She looked at the list and added one more, the 10th of June. Bought myself roses. Just because. Because she could. Because they looked beautiful on the kitchen counter. Because Aaron had always hated the smell. By the end of the week, Chloe called with an update. Jonathan's team settled. Aaron returned the deposit plus fees. He's officially out of the deal. Kelsey nodded. Good. Any word from him? Not directly. His lawyer's asking for amicable terms. He wants to avoid press. Kelsey raised an eyebrow. Press? Chloe laughed. Apparently Nicole's parents are big in real estate. Bad headlines wouldn't look good on him right now. Kelsey sipped her tea, letting the warmth flood her chest. Well, she said. Maybe he should have thought of that before cashing someone else's check. The next morning, she woke to sunshine spilling across her duvet and the quiet hum of a life that was finally hers again. Aaron's lies were unraveling. His arrogance had become evidence. And his downfall. It was written in the fine print he never cared to read. The knock never came. Instead, the door burst open with the kind of force that said, "I still think I belong here." Kelsey didn't flinch. She was standing by the kitchen island, hands deep in soapy water, rinsing the last of her coffee mugs. She'd been expecting this visit from Aaron. The storm had been circling for days, and now it had arrived. He charged in, face flushed, hair disheveled like he'd run here. "What the hell is this, Kelsey?" He waved a piece of paper in the air like it was some cheap flyer the cease and desist Chloe had drafted and sent to the buyer's attorney. "You're sabotaging me. You're telling people I committed fraud." She calmly turned off the tap, dried her hands, and turned around to face him. "You committed fraud, Aaron," she said, voice quiet but unwavering. "You tried to sell a home that doesn't belong to you." "It's our home," he snapped. "We bought it together." "We bought it," she agreed, "but you signed it away 6 months ago during the refinancing. You didn't read the papers again." She walked to the drawer near the fridge, pulled out the manila folder Chloe had helped her organize, and took out the deed. Page 7. Clause 3B. Sole ownership transfer. Dated and notarized. Aaron snatched it from her, his eyes darting over the text, then locking on his own signature at the bottom. He blinked. Then again. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was the dawning horror of a man realizing he'd played himself. "You tricked me," he said, breathless. "No," she replied. "You didn't bother to read. You never did." He tossed the paper onto the counter like it had betrayed him and started pacing, one hand raking through his hair, the other clenching and unclenching at his side. "You're trying to ruin me," he said. "Nicole's furious. Her parents are threatening to pull out of the investment deal. I'm losing everything." "You did that on your own," she said. "I just made sure you didn't take me down with you." He turned to her sharply. "You never used to be like this." She didn't move. "I was never allowed to be." He let out a bitter laugh and walked toward the living room, eyes scanning the space like it belonged to a different universe. Because it did. She had changed everything since he left. The curtains were open, letting in golden afternoon light instead of the blackout shades he preferred. The couch had been rearranged. His tacky sports memorabilia was gone. Her grandmother's quilt now lay folded across the armrest, a quiet declaration of ownership. Even the scent had changed. Cedarwood and orange peel. "Where's my espresso machine?" he asked suddenly. "Sold. My vinyl collection. Packed in storage. I didn't throw anything out." "Not yet." His nostrils flared. "You went through my things. I reclaimed my space." He sat down on the couch, leaned forward, and let his hands hang between his knees. For the first time, he didn't look angry, he looked lost. "I have nowhere to go tonight. That's not my responsibility anymore." He looked up, the flash of his old charm surfacing through the cracks. "Kels. We were together for 6 years. And during that time, I shrank myself so you could feel bigger." "You don't mean that." "Yes, Aaron. I do." She walked over, her footsteps soft but sure, and stood a few feet from him. "You tried to erase me with a phone call. You laughed about me needing to find a new place to live. You wired money that wasn't yours to claim. And when it all collapsed, you came running back, not with remorse but with rage." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I didn't know. I swear, Kelsey, I didn't know the title had changed. That's not a defense. That's neglect. You were careless, and now it's costing you." The silence that followed stretched like glass between them. He stood up again, but slower this time. Less fire. More defeat. "You're really kicking me out." She met his eyes. "I'm giving you the dignity of walking out on your own. Because if I file the paperwork tomorrow, you'll be removed by law enforcement." "Is that what you want?" He stared at her. His face collapsed, no longer the confident man who once spun stories over dinner parties, but a man unmasked. "You've changed," he said again, but this time it wasn't an accusation. It was awe. Or maybe fear. I've finally remembered who I was before you. Kelsey walked to the front door and opened it. Leave the keys. Don't come back without notice. And don't make this harder than it needs to be. He hesitated for one long, heavy moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the keys. He placed them on the entryway table without a word. As he stepped past her, he paused at the threshold. I loved you, you know. She didn't look away. You loved control. That's not the same. The door clicked shut. She locked it and leaned against it. Her hands trembled, her knees threatened to buckle. But she didn't fall, because she had never stood taller. That night, Kelsey lit the bergamot candle he always hated. She poured herself a glass of red wine, not to cope, but to celebrate. Not a party. Just a quiet victory. Her phone lit up a message from Chloe. Chloe, did the storm hit Kelsey? Yes. And this time I held the thunder. She curled up on her newly claimed couch, surrounded by her new normal. She wasn't the same woman who had once shrunk for his comfort. She was the woman who could look the storm in the eye and tell it to leave. The knock was light, almost playful. Kelsey barely looked up from her screen. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the knock hadn't sounded like trouble. She placed her tea on the coaster and walked to the door. When she opened it, she saw a familiar frame standing in the hallway. Aaron. And beside him, holding his arm, was a woman she'd only seen once, smiling smugly from a tiny profile photo on a bank transaction he thought she'd never notice. Nicole. Her hair was perfectly curled. Her lips were glossed in a warm coral tone. She wore a beige coat too expensive for the weather and a confidence Kelsey knew would melt in minutes. Well, Nicole said brightly, you must be the roommate. Kelsey didn't respond. Aaron looked nervous. His hand twitched where it held Nicole's bros. We're just here to grab a few things, he said quickly. Won't be long. Kelsey stepped back, not out of courtesy but strategy. Let them walk in. Let them feel comfortable. Let the truth hit harder. Nicole strolled into the apartment like she'd already ordered new furniture for it. She ran her fingers across the edge of the dining table, glanced toward the kitchen. This is even better than I pictured, she said. You kept telling me it had charm. You didn't mention it had sunlight. Kelsey closed the door. Aaron remained near the entrance, stiff. Are you here to give her a tour? Aaron, Kelsey asked quietly. Or to let her believe this is her new home? Nicole turned, laughing lightly. He already did. I've seen pictures. He said we'd redecorate together. New colors, maybe take that wall down. She pointed toward the load-bearing beam Kelsey had fought with a contractor to preserve. Nicole, Kelsey said calmly, you're trespassing. The room stilled. Nicole's smile faltered. I'm sorry, this isn't Aaron's place. It never was. And it certainly isn't yours. Nicole blinked. Aaron opened his mouth. Let me guess, Kelsey continued. He told you he sold the apartment, right? That he was waiting on the paperwork to clear. Nicole looked between them. You mean it's not? Kelsey walked slowly to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the deed, and laid it flat on the counter. Title's in my name. Aaron signed it over during refinancing. He didn't read the documents. Again. Aaron stepped forward. It's not that simple. Oh, it is. Kelsey cut him off. I own this apartment. And you tried to sell it behind my back while laughing over the phone about where I'd live next. Nicole took a step back. Wait, you said the sale went through. You told me we had the deposit in hand. I did have the deposit. Aaron mumbled. I just didn't think she'd react this way. Nicole's voice turned ice cold. You told me you paid your half. That we were starting fresh. Kelsey folded her arms. He stole the deposit. The buyer threatened to sue. He nearly ruined 2 lives, and now he's dragging you in to complete the trilogy. Nicole turned to Aaron, voice rising. You lied to me. About the sale. About the money. About everything. Nicole, baby, don't. The word sliced through the air like a blade. She looked around the apartment again, this time not with admiration but with dawning horror. You mean this was never ours? You made me believe. Her hand trembled as she pulled her coat tighter. I gave up my lease. I put money into our future. Aaron stepped forward. We can still fix this. No, Aaron, Kelsey said. You don't get to rewrite this. She looked at Nicole. He told me he loved me while planning to replace me. He called from a hotel lobby to say he was divorcing me, and now he's using you as his alibi. Nicole stared at Aaron as if seeing a stranger. I thought you were honest, she said, barely a whisper. You said she was vindictive. I am, Kelsey said, stepping closer, voice like steel. But only when it's deserved. Nicole's eyes welled, but she didn't let the tears fall. You're unbelievable, she said to Aaron. And I was unbelievably stupid. She turned to Kelsey again. I'm sorry. You should be, Kelsey said, but not to me, to yourself. Nicole turned and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. Aaron didn't move. You think you've won, he muttered. Kelsey walked past him, opened the door wide. I think I've finally stopped losing. He hesitated. I have nowhere to go. You had a future, she said. You traded it for lies. He lingered in the doorway like a man begging for redemption he hadn't earned. Goodbye, Aaron. And she closed the door in his face. The lock clicked. The silence that followed was not empty. It was victorious. That night, Kelsey sat on the sofa, legs tucked beneath her candle flickering nearby. She didn't cry, she didn't rant, she didn't pour wine. She breathed. For once the air in her home belonged to her alone. Her phone buzzed. Chloe. Was that her, Kelsey? Oh yes. He brought her in like it was a honeymoon suite. Chloe. And now Kelsey. She walked out, he still standing there stunned. The honeymoon's over. Kelsey put her phone down, leaned back, and smiled into the quiet. Nicole had walked in thinking she was stepping into a love story, but Kelsey, she had already rewritten the ending. Nicole stood in the middle of the living room, like a statue, perfectly still except for the slight twitch in her jaw. Kelsey didn't move. She didn't need to. Silence had always been her sharpest blade. Aaron hovered near the kitchen counter, fidgeting with the sleeve of his shirt like it might shield him from the unraveling storm. So, Nicole finally said, her voice brittle. What else did you lie about? The question didn't hit like an accusation. It landed like an autopsy. Aaron opened his mouth, then closed it again. His face, once full of confidence and charm, sagged with panic. Nicole, come on, he said. Don't do this here. Where should I do it, Aaron? Her voice rose. In the parking garage. On Instagram, where's the best place to find out my boyfriend's entire life is a lie? Aaron glanced at Kelsey, who leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, silent. She's twisting it, he said. She's trying to make you turn against me. Nicole turned slowly to Kelsey. Did he really sign away the apartment months ago? Kelsey nodded once. Did he take money from the buyer? Another nod. And the buyer threatened to sue him. Chloe can send you the emails, Kelsey said calmly. It's all documented. Nicole let out a sharp, breathless laugh and took 2 steps back. She looked around the apartment at the clean counters, the rearranged furniture, the lack of anything that belonged to her. I thought I was moving in, she whispered. I brought curtains in the car. Kelsey didn't react. Nicole looked at Aaron again. You said this was ours. It was going to be. He insisted. I just needed time to fix the paperwork. I didn't think she'd fight me. You mean you didn't think she'd still exist, Nicole said. That she'd just fade away, right? Aaron's face flushed. This was all supposed to be clean. She was never supposed to complicate it. She's not the complication, Nicole snapped. You are. Aaron stepped forward, trying to close the space between them. We can still make it work. You and me. Nicole backed away. How, Aaron? With whose money and whose home? You lied about everything. About the apartment. The buyer. Your job. The investor you said wanted in on your app idea. Was that even real? He said nothing. You told me you were building something. He shouted. I was trying to give us a future. You were trying to borrow a future, she shot back. From her. From me. From everyone. She turned to Kelsey again. You knew all along, didn't you? Kelsey's voice was soft but clear. I gave him enough rope, he did the rest. Nicole laughed again. This time there were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. I feel so stupid. Kelsey stepped forward but didn't reach out. Don't We all believe the things we want to be true. The mistake isn't trusting, it's staying after the mask slips. Nicole nodded slowly. Well, the mask is gone now. She turned back to Aaron, who was staring at her like a man realizing the floor beneath him had vanished. I'm done, she said. Nicole, don't overreact. You plan to replace her, she said coldly, but you never told me I was just a better painted version of the same lie. Aaron looked helpless, like a child scolded in front of a class. You can't just leave. Watch me. She grabbed her purse from the side table. As she did, she turned to Kelsey again. I'm sorry I ever stepped into your life like it was mine to take. Kelsey gave a small nod. You're stepping out now. That's what matters. Nicole walked to the door. Just before opening it, she paused. And for what it's worth, I hope you take him for everything. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Aaron was still staring at it like she might walk back in. She didn't. Kelsey walked to the kitchen, refilled her tea, and leaned against the counter sipping. Well, she said after a moment. That was thorough. Aaron turned to her, eyes wild. You let that happen. I didn't have to do anything. You did it to yourself. You could have backed me up. Why, you want me to lie for you now? You ruined everything. Kelsey raised an eyebrow. Aaron, you called me from a hallway to tell me you were selling the home we built together. You laughed. Then you showed up with another woman, hoping I'd just vanish like a bad memory. She walked toward him, voice steady. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped pretending. He sat on the couch and buried his face in his hands. I lost everything in 24 hours. No, she corrected. You lost everything the moment you thought I didn't matter. Today you just found out. He looked up at her, broken and suddenly much smaller than he had ever seemed before. What am I supposed to do now? You figure it out, Kelsey said. Like I had to. He opened his mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to apologize. She held up a hand. Don't. Save it for your therapist. Or your lawyer. She walked to the door and opened it again. You don't live here anymore, Aaron. He stood slowly, like a man trying to delay the inevitable. This really is it. Kelsey nodded. This was it, the moment you chose to lie instead of lead. He walked out the door. She didn't slam it. She closed it gently, then turned the lock with a satisfying click. Later that night, Kelsey sat alone at the dining table. Not lonely, not sad, just whole. She pulled out her notebook, opened to a clean page, and wrote at the top in all caps, what I learned from silence. Underneath it she wrote, let people fall on their own swords. Let the truth speak louder than your anger, and never ever hand over the blueprint to your life to someone who hasn't earned it. She smiled. The castle had crumbled. And in the rubble, she was building something better. Something real. The envelope felt heavier than it should. It wasn't the paper. It was the weight of everything it carried, disappointment, detachment, and finally dignity. Kelsey sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes outside the cafe. She watched people walk in and out, chatting, checking their phones, living their small, ordinary lives. None of them knew that today she was ending a chapter 6 years long. She reached into her bag, took out the cream envelope, and exhaled slowly. This isn't revenge, she whispered to herself. This is release. Then she opened the door. Aaron was already there, seated near the back in the seat facing the window like he always preferred. He looked up when she entered, face unreadable. Maybe hopeful, maybe tired. Hey, he said softly, rising halfway. You look calm. I am. Kelsey replied, sliding into the seat opposite him. That's new. She placed the envelope on the table squarely between them. You know what this is. He didn't touch it. Not right away. You went through with it, he said. I did. You didn't want to talk first. Kelsey tilted her head. Aaron, you had months to talk. You chose silence until you needed something. That landed like a stone. He finally opened the envelope. The rustle of paper was surgical, slicing clean. You had this ready before Nicole walked out, didn't you? Yes, so you were just waiting for the right moment to cut me loose. Number. I was waiting for the moment I no longer mistook guilt for love. Aaron flinched. The first real crack in his carefully worn exterior. "Do you hate me?" "No," she said. "That's the part that surprised me most. I thought I would. I wanted to even. But now, I don't." She leaned back, voice even. "I spent years giving you more room than I gave myself. More excuses. More chances. I thought patience meant loyalty. But I was just slowly silencing myself. That's not what I wanted." "No," she agreed. "But you didn't care enough to notice it was happening." Aaron looked down at the papers. They were simple, legally speaking. Fair, clear, unemotional. "You didn't write anything," he said. "No note. No goodbye." "Why would I write you a letter?" she asked. "Everything I needed to say was in the years I stayed." He reached for the pen, paused. "I still think we had good times." "We did," Kelsey said. "And I'll always be grateful for them. But even a beautiful painting doesn't belong on a burning wall." He chuckled quietly. "It wasn't joy, it was resignation." "You've changed." "I've come home to myself," she corrected. "There's a difference." He began flipping through the pages, stopping now and then as if hoping the ink would blur, the numbers would change, the meaning would shift. "And this is all because of Nicole." Aaron. Her voice firmed. Nicole was the symptom, not the cause. He rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean not to," she said. Outside, the wind picked up. The chimes on the door rattled as a new customer entered, laughing into her phone. Life, as always, carried on. Aaron stared at Kelsey again, really seeing her now. The straight posture, the calm expression, the subtle glow of someone no longer fighting themselves. "Do you have someone else?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Me." That stung more than anything else could have. He sighed, lifted the pen again. "You're sure about this?" "I was never more sure of anything." He signed. The line was shaky, uneven, but final. He pushed the folder back toward her. "What happens now?" Kelsey tucked the papers back into her envelope, then into her bag. "Now we both get to start over. You can build whatever version of yourself you want, and I can build a life that finally fits me." "Will I see you again?" She paused. "Maybe. In your dreams. In the mirror. In the parts of you that know better now." He laughed, once bitter and hollow. "You're better at this than I am." "No," she said gently. "I've just been practicing longer." She stood. He did too. "Did I ever make you happy?" he asked. She took a breath. "Yes. In pieces. In fleeting, beautiful, unsustainable moments. So why isn't that enough?" "Because I've learned I deserve more than pieces." She extended her hand. Not out of sentiment, but closure. He shook it slowly. His grip lingered. She let go first. On her walk back through the city, Kelsey didn't cry. She didn't even feel heavy. If anything, her steps were lighter than they'd been in years. She bought herself a croissant from the bakery she used to avoid when Aaron was watching his weight, and a small bouquet of wildflowers. No occasion. Just because she could. Back home, she lit her favorite candle. The one he always said gave him headaches. Then she brewed tea. Lavender. No sugar. She curled up by the window, city lights winking beyond the glass, and opened her journal. She wrote, "I don't hate you, Aaron. I just finally love myself more." Then below it, "This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of the chapter I get to write with both hands, no edits, no compromise, no erasing myself to make room for someone else." She underlined that last part twice. And then, for the first time in years, she slept like someone who belonged completely to herself. The first thing she threw out was his chair. That bulky, oversized, self-important thing he insisted was ergonomic. It had loomed in the corner of the living room like a symbol of his presence, his authority, his permanence. Kelsey dragged it to the curb with a strange sense of reverence, not for the chair, but for the act itself. She didn't watch it get picked up. She didn't need to. It was gone. That was enough. Over the next few days, she turned her apartment upside down, not to erase the past, but to rewrite it in her own handwriting. The navy rug they argued about donated. The framed jerseys he insisted had sentimental value boxed and returned. The espresso machine she never got to touch because he claimed she didn't know how to use it, she learned. And then she made herself a perfect cappuccino. Foam, heart, and all. She didn't cry once, but she did laugh, softly. Often. And loudly the first time she danced barefoot in the living room to a song she liked, volume up, windows open, no one telling her to turn it down. She repainted the bedroom. A warm sage green. Calming. Her own choice. No compromise. She bought new sheets, soft ones in cotton linen with tiny embroidered vines on the edges. She rearranged the bookshelf not by genre or color like Erin preferred, but by instinct. The way it made her smile. The air in the apartment felt lighter. Like the space was finally exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Lauren came over on Saturday with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Wow," she said, stepping inside. It's yours now." "It always was," Kelsey said. "I just forgot." They sat on the floor eating noodles from cartons surrounded by open windows and scented candles and the faint hum of a city that no longer overwhelmed her. "Do you feel lonely?" Lauren asked gently. Kelsey thought about it. Then shook her head. I feel alone. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Lonely is craving noise," Kelsey said. "Alone is finally hearing yourself." That night after Lauren left, Kelsey walked from room to room barefoot. She touched the corners, the walls, the knobs on the drawers as if reacquainting herself with a space that had once belonged to someone else's vision. In the kitchen, she removed the last of Erin's things from the high shelf: an old whiskey tumbler, a branded mug from his law school days, a bottle of cologne he'd forgotten in the back of the cabinet. She didn't throw them out right away. Instead, she placed them in a box, sealed it, and labeled it simply, "What I no longer carry." In the hallway mirror, she caught a glimpse of herself. Barefaced. Hair tied back. Sweatshirt loose. Socks mismatched. And for the first time in years, she smiled at her own reflection without adjusting anything. "There you are," she whispered. The next morning she opened every window. Let the sunlight flood the apartment. Let the breeze roll through like a blessing. She brewed coffee and sat by the window with her journal. She wrote, "This isn't a fresh start. This is a return, a reclamation, a reintroduction. This is what it feels like to come home to myself." She began new routines. Soft ones, gentle ones. Monday mornings started with yoga in the living room, no mat, just a rug and her breath. Evenings ended with music and reading and zero screens. She began collecting plants, one for each room. She named them. She didn't know why, but it made her laugh. And laughter was something sacred now. One night, she found an old note Erin had scribbled on a grocery list years ago. "Kels, don't forget the oat milk." "You always do." She stared at it. Not with sadness, just neutrality. Then she folded it up and slid it into the same box with his other things. That chapter was over. It didn't need burning. Just boxing. Chloe called midweek. "He returned the papers," she said. "Signed. Clean. No pushback." "Good," Kelsey replied. "Any surprises?" "None. You're free." The word landed softly. Not like a bang, but like a door unlocking. That evening, she lit a candle curled up in her favorite chair, the one she chose, and whispered out loud, "I'm proud of you." She meant it. On Sunday, she hosted brunch. Just a few close friends, mismatched plates, fresh fruit mimosas, and jazz playing low. The apartment filled with laughter, with voices that lifted her rather than drained her. One friend looked around and said, "Kels, your place has never felt so alive." And she smiled. "It finally matches me." When everyone left, she did the dishes, slowly humming to herself. The light outside dimmed, casting long golden streaks across the floor. She stood in the doorway to her bedroom, hand resting on the wall, and felt it. Not grief. Not anger. But peace. Later in bed, wrapped in her soft green sheets, Kelsey stared at the ceiling and whispered, "This was never just about losing him. It was about finding me." She closed her eyes and slept without ghosts. The city below stretched wide, lit like a quiet symphony of lives moving forward. From 12 stories up, Kelsey could see how small everything looked: the streets that once swallowed her whole, the windows that once represented other people's dreams. Now they shimmered. peaceful, possible. She leaned on the cool glass railing, her breath forming a faint mist in the early evening air. Wind tugged gently at her coat like a whisper. Behind her, Chloe approached with 2 glasses of champagne and her usual smile, the kind that always felt like coming home. "It's poetic, you know," Chloe said, handing over a flute. "You're finally above it all." Literally. Kelsey gave a quiet laugh, the kind she hadn't heard from herself in years. "I used to be terrified of heights," she said, "but now it feels earned." They found a table tucked beneath a canopy of warm string lights. Around them, couples laughed, a jazz trio played somewhere on the far end of the rooftop, and candles flickered in their glass jars. "You don't look like someone who just finished a divorce," Chloe teased. "You look like someone who just got promoted to CEO of her own life." "Because that's exactly what it feels like." Kelsey reached into her bag and slid a slim card across the table. On it, the long game, practical power for women who are starting over. "You launched it," Chloe said, wide-eyed. 3 posts up. One about financial safety after a breakup. One on emotional detachment. And one's just me being honest about crying on the kitchen floor and standing up again. Chloe smiled, her voice softening. "You know this will help people, right? Like, really help." Kelsey nodded. Her eyes glimmered, not with tears, but with something steadier purpose. "I didn't think anyone would read it. Then I got this message from a woman in Kansas. She said, 'I left with $43 and a suitcase. I've been sleeping on my sister's couch, but your post made me sit up straighter.'" "That gave me chills," Chloe whispered. "Me too," Kelsey said. "And then I realized maybe I was never meant to just survive this. Maybe I was meant to map the way back for someone else." They clinked glasses. Not in celebration of escape, but of reclamation. Later that night, back in her apartment, hers finally, Kelsey curled up on the couch, laptop glowing against her knees. The blog dashboard showed new subscribers, new comments, new voices rising out of the silence. "I left too. He made me feel like furniture. Your story is mine, just with different curtains." She responded to each one. With care. With patience. With the tenderness she wished someone had shown her. A week later, the email arrived. Subject: women who reclaimed everything. Feature invitation. At first she thought it was spam. But as she read, her chest tightened with something unexpected: disbelief. And then awe. "Dear Kelsey, I've been reading your blog for the last few weeks. Your voice is steady, strong, and soft in all the right ways. We're putting together a national feature on women who rebuilt not just their lives but their power. Your story stood out. We'd love to include you." Kelsey didn't cry. But she did sit in silence for a long time, hand resting over her heart, eyes closed. Remembering the girl who once whispered, "I can't do this," into a pillow at 2 a.m. She opened a reply and began typing. "Dear Simone, I'm honored and surprised. When I started the long game, I thought maybe 10 people would read it. But every time I hit publish, I imagined one woman, just one, sitting in a dark room feeling invisible. And I wanted her to know she's not. My story isn't just about divorce, it's about dignity. It's about unlearning the shame of leaving. About discovering I never needed permission to begin again. The women who read my blog aren't broken. They're rebuilding. And if I can help them draw the blueprints, that's enough." She hesitated, then added, "The view from the rooftop means more when you've climbed it with blistered hands." She hit send. Then leaned back and breathed. Not out of relief, but because she was still here and finally living on her own terms. That weekend she returned to the rooftop alone. No friend beside her, no nervous energy. Just the wind, her journal, and a heart that no longer raced from anxiety, only intention. She walked straight to the railing. No fear, no hesitation. She looked out at the city. She thought about every almost that had led her here. Every time she'd shrunk herself to keep the peace. Every version of herself she'd buried to make space for someone else's comfort. And now she took up space. On the page. In her home. In the world. She opened her notebook and wrote at the top, Chapter 1, the part where I don't ask anymore. And underneath, in slanted handwriting, I am the storm. I am the silence after it. I am not what happened to me. I am what I build next. Somewhere down below, someone was slamming a cab door. Somewhere across the rooftop, a man proposed. Somewhere in another city, a woman was reading The Long Game, her hands trembling, her breath shallow, her heart ready. And maybe, just maybe, Kelsey was the voice she needed. Not to rescue her, but to remind her. She could do this. She could begin again.